Okay, here's our first book, How to Steal a Dog, by Barbara O'Connor. Looking forward to reading this. Chapter 1. The day I decided to steal a dog was the same day my best friend, Luann Godfrey, found out I lived in a car. I had told Mama she would find out sooner or later, seeing how nosy she is and all, but Mama had rolled her eyes and said, "Just get on up there to the bus stop, Georgiana, and quit your whining." So that's what I did. I stood up there at the bus stop pretending like I still lived in apartment 3B. I pretended like I didn't have mustard on my shirt from the day before. I pretended I hadn't washed my hair in the bathroom of the Texaco gas station that very morning. And I pretended like my daddy hadn't waltzed off and left us with nothing but 3 rolls of quarters and a mayonnaise jar full of wadded up dollar bills. I guess I'm pretty good at pretending. My brother Toby, however, is not so good at pretending. When Mama told him to get up on top of the bus stop and quit his whining, he cried and carried on like the baby that he is. "What's wrong with Toby?" Luann asked me when we were standing at the bus stop. "He has an earache," I said, trying as hard as anything to look like my life was just as normal as could be inside, instead of all the craziness that it really feels like. When I saw Luann's eyes narrow and her lips squeezed together, I knew her nosiness was about to irritate me. "Sure enough," she said. "Then how come your mama is making him go to school?" She kept on looking at me with that squinty-eyed look of hers, but I didn't let on that I was irritated. I just shrugged and hoped she would hush up about Toby. She did, and then she went and turned her nosy self loose on me. "No offense, Georgiana," she said, "but you're starting to look a kind of unkempt." Unkempt. That was like Mama talking, if I've ever heard anything. Luann would never have said a word unkempt if she had heard her Mama say it first. And what was I supposed to say anyways? Was I supposed to say, "Well, for your information, Luann Godfrey, it's kind of hard to keep your clothes looking nice when you've been sleeping in the back of a Chevrolet for a week"? Or maybe I was supposed to say, "I don't know, Luann, but my hairbrush got tossed out in a pile of stuff Mr. Dita left on the sidewalk when he kicked us out from our apartment." And then Luann would say, "Why did Mr. Dita do that?" And I would say, "'Cause 3 rolls of quarters and mayonnaise jar full of wadded up dollar bills doesn't pay the rent, Luann." But I didn't say anything. I acted like I hadn't heard a word unkempt, and just climbed on the bus and sat in the 6th seat on the left with Luana, like I always did. I knew Luana wouldn't give up, though. I knew she kept on until she found the truth. "What if she wants to come over?" I said to Mama. "Or what if she looks out the window and finds something that we don't have there anymore?" And Mama just flapped her hands at me and closed her eyes to see how tired she was from working 2 jobs. So every day I imagined Luann peeking in the kitchen window of apartment 3B. When she did, of course, she would see that me and Toby and Mama and Daddy eating our dinner and being happy. She'd seen some other family, some happy family that wasn't broken like mine. And then one day, we got off the school bus. Luann followed me. Went with the nosiest thing I could imagine. She followed me. I was trying to catch up with Toby because he grabbed the car keys and ran on ahead of me, so I didn't even notice her sneaking along behind me. She followed me all the way to apartment 3B. Across the street and clear around the back of Eckerd drugstore, where our car was parked, with laundry hanging out the window and Toby sitting on a milk crate waiting for me. If there was ever a time when I wished the earth would open up and swallow me whole, it was when I turned around and saw Luann looking at me, and Toby, and that car and all. I could see her thoughts just as plain as day, right there on her face. I wanted to wave my hand and made that dented up car disappear off the face of the earth, but more than anything, I wanted my daddy to come on home and change everything the way it was before. I set a smile on my face and said, "It's just temporary," like Mama had said to me about 100 times. Luann turned and read, "Oh, when Mama gets paid, we're moving into our new apartment," I said. "Oh." And then I just stood there, We both just stood there, looking at our feet. I could feel the distance between us growing until it seemed like Luann Godfrey, who had been my friend forever, was standing clear on the other side of the universe from me. Finally, she said, "I better go." But she didn't. She just stood there, and I squeezed my eyes shut and told myself to not look pitiful, and for heaven's sakes, don't cry. And then, of course, Toby had to go and make everything worse by saying, "Mama left a note that she's working late. We're supposed to eat macaroni that's in the cooler." Luann arched her eyebrows and then sat up. "I haven't seen your daddy in a long time." That did it. I couldn't stop the tears from spilling out of my squeezed-up eyes. I sat down right there in the drugstore parking lot and told Luann everything. I felt her arm around me, and I heard her saying something, but I was too lost in my misery to do anything but cry. When I was all cried out, I stood up and brushed the dirt off my seat of my pants, pushed the hair out of my eyes, and said, "Promise you won't tell?" Luann said, "I promise." "I mean, not even your mama." Luann flicked for just a second, but then said, "Okay." I crooked my pinky finger in the air and waited for her to give me a pinky promise, but she hesitated. I stamped my foot and jabbed my pinky. Finally, she crooked her pinky around mine, and we shook. I better go," she said. I hurried and watched her across the parking lot, then glanced back at me before disappearing around the corner of the drugstore. "I hate that macaroni," Toby said from his seat on the milk crate. It was just like him not to give me one little minute to wallow in my misery. I stomped around to the back of the car and kicked the cooler, sending it and toppling it over sideways. Ice and water and plastic containers spilled out into the parking lot. "Me too," I said. Then I climbed in the back seat of the car and waited for Mama to come back.